Like, it started really early with my mom pissing me off about something, and she didn't give me 50 cents to go to the store or whatever,
And
and
then what would you do? Just
I'd be
give me
like,
the let me understand the process.
I would be in my room like, "My mom is so mean."
Jill Scott once had everything: Grammy Awards, millions of records sold, sold out arenas, a voice that could silence the world. But few people knew that behind that glory was a woman who at 52 had to serve tables on a film set, who cried in silence, who was hurt without being able to fight back. In a rare moment, Jill revealed what she had hidden for decades. Those tears were real. Not acting, not art, but the price she had to pay to survive in a system full of power. How much pain was buried? How many truths were traded for fame? And in the end, what did Jill Scott have to sacrifice to become a legend? The little girl, taught to stay, silent to survive. Before Jill Scott became a neo-soul icon, before her voice echoed on Grammy stages, and in millions of headphones around the world, there was once a little girl growing up in North Philadelphia, a place where vulnerability was rarely allowed to exist. In 1972, Jill Heather Scott was born in a working-class neighborhood, with dusty streets, aging row houses, and the sound of police sirens as familiar as daily rhythm. She was not born into an artistic family, nor did she have a ready-made launchpad for fame. Her mother, Joyce Scott, and her grandmother were two women who carried the entire family on their shoulders, through exhausting low-income jobs guided by strict discipline and firm principles. Jill was an only child. That meant she was deeply loved, but it also meant that every expectation rested squarely on her shoulders. With no siblings to rely on, and no one to share the pressure, she learned early how to control herself. In that small house, there was no room for impulsiveness or rebellion. Jill's family followed Jehovah's Witness, a religious community known for its strict rules in the United States. No parties, no lively festivals, no lavish birthdays, no flashy clothes, no loud music. Everything had to fit the doctrine, the mold, and adult expectations. From a very young age, Jill understood that personal emotions were never more important than collective stability. When she was sad, she had to stay quiet. When she was angry, she had to endure. When she was hurt, she had to keep it inside. In an environment where faith was placed above everything else, questioning or challenging ideas was sometimes seen as immoral. Jill was not encouraged to express a strong personality. She was taught how to endure, how to restrain herself, how to move forward without making noise. Her high school years passed in near-perfect obedience. She was an excellent student, caused no trouble, and attended the prestigious Philadelphia High School for Girls. Teachers loved her because she never disturbed anyone. Friends valued her because she always knew how to listen. But few people realized that Jill rarely voiced what she truly thought. Inside that good girl was an entire world of compressed emotions. After graduating, Jill enrolled at Temple University with the dream of becoming an English teacher. She studied while working 2 jobs at the same time to cover expenses. There were periods when she worked more than 40 hours a week while still studying full-time. It was a pace that exhausted even many adults, yet Jill never complained. She was used to gritting her teeth, used to not demanding anything, used to placing herself last. 3 years later, she decided to drop out. Not because she had failed, but because she realized that the path others had laid out was not the life she wanted. Even when she changed direction, Jill did not rebel, argue, or make noise. She simply quietly stepped onto another road. Jill began writing poetry, joining small poetry readings, in cafes, performing in cramped spaces, with only a few dozen audience members. No one promised her a future. No one praised her as a star. But it was the only place where Jill was allowed to say the things she had never dared to say. Poetry and music became her refuge, a place where she could cry without being blamed, be angry without being judged, be weak without being seen as wrong. However, the habit of just keep going was deeply ingrained in her. When she faced difficulties, Jill did not complain. When she was hurt, she did not speak up. When she was treated unfairly, she chose silence. The moment a voice stepped out of the darkness. When Jill Scott left Temple University, after nearly 3 years of pursuing her dream of becoming an English teacher, it was not an impulsive decision. There were no tears in the hallways, no arguments with her family, no dramatic declarations. She simply quietly understood that she was living someone else's life, not her own. Throughout her college years, Jill studied full-time while working 2 part-time jobs to support herself. Some weeks her total working hours exceeded 40, while she still had to complete assignments, teaching internships, and demanding exams. She was exhausted, yet remained silent. She was tired, yet kept going. Until one day Jill realized that if she continued down this path, she would lose herself. After dropping out, Jill had no plan B. No recording contract, no powerful backer, no savings. The only things she had were pages filled with handwritten words and a voice that constantly urged to be heard. She began appearing in small cafes and underground stages in Philadelphia, where young artists gathered to read poetry rap and tell their life stories. It was the world of poetry, slam spoken word, and underground hip-hop, where emotions were raw, honest, and unpolished. There no one cared whether you had a college degree. There was only one question: were you true to yourself? Jill quickly became a familiar face in this community. Her poems spoke about Black women, poverty, love, pain, and the longing to be heard. She did not shout. She did not show off. Jill's voice was low, warm, and unhurried, yet every word seemed to strike straight at the listener's heart. Gradually, her name began circulating by word of mouth in Philly's underground art scene. There's a girl who reads poetry incredibly well, you have to hear her. And it was at one such performance that Jill's life took a different turn. Questlove, the drummer of The Roots, the most prominent hip-hop soul band in Philadelphia at the time, happened to hear Jill perform. He did not see a girl trying to become a star. He saw a woman speaking her truth with her entire soul. Questlove was immediately drawn to her. He invited Jill into the studio to work with the band. For Jill, it felt like the first door had finally opened. She began writing with The Roots, including the song You Got Me, a tender, poetic, and deeply emotional love ballad. The song quickly became a phenomenon. When it was released in 1999, You Got Me was performed by Erykah Badu on the album and later won a Grammy Award. Jill was a co-writer, but not the main vocalist on the official recording. For many people, that was bitter. But Jill, following her old habit, chose silence. She did not complain, she did not demand, she did not protest. She simply kept working. Then the fateful moment arrived. At a live performance by The Roots, Jill was invited on stage to sing You Got Me. No studio, no editing, no special effects. Just her a microphone and thousands of spectators. When Jill began to sing, the entire hall fell silent. People were not just hearing a song, they were hearing a soul, a rare authenticity, a voice that was both fragile and powerful. That night, everything changed. Audiences began asking, "Who is she?" Producers started paying attention. Record labels began calling. Jill Scott, the girl who once read poetry in small cafes, officially stepped into the spotlight. Yet few people knew that behind that glorious moment was still a woman accustomed to standing in the background, making room for others, and believing that silence was the price she had to pay to stay in the game, becoming the voice of an entire generation of Black women. After her breakthrough moment with The Roots, Jill Scott was no longer an unfamiliar name in the music world. She entered the early 2000s with something very few young artists possessed: public trust. Not because of flashy marketing strategies, not because of scandals, but because people could feel the authenticity in every line she sang. In 2000, Jill released her debut album, Who is Jill Scott? Words and Sounds, Volume 1. From the very title, she posed a major question to the world: who is Jill Scott? And the answer resonated clearly in every track. The album sold over 1 million copies in the United States, was certified platinum, and quickly became a pillar of the rising neo-soul movement. The song, A Long Walk, became a phenomenon on R&B radio stations, appearing constantly in cafes, on buses, and in the bedrooms of millions of young people. It was not a loud love song. It was a gentle conversation between two souls. Jill sang as if she were whispering into the listener's ear, and it was that intimacy that made her different. At a time when the music industry was glorifying images of women as sexy, slender, and unrealistically perfect, Jill emerged as an exception. She did not hide her body. She did not try to force herself into a mold. She did not chase trends. She stood on stage with a full-figure natural curls and a face without excessive makeup and still shined. For many Black women, Jill was not just a singer, she was a role model, a confirmation that you did not have to change yourself to be loved. The success of her debut album opened a series of flourishing years. In 2004, Jill released Beautifully Human Words and Sounds Volume 2, which continued to rank high on Billboard and sold over 500,000 copies in just the first few months. The album earned her multiple Grammy nominations and proved that her earlier success was not a stroke of luck. Jill was not a one-season phenomenon. She was a true artist. In 2007, The Real Thing Words and Sounds Volume 3 was released, marking a period of maturity in Jill's music and mindset. The song Hate on Me became a personal manifesto, in which she confronted envy pressure and public expectations head-on. Jill no longer avoided them. She spoke plainly, "I know you talk about me, but I am still standing here." The album entered the Billboard 200 and helped Jill win another Grammy, bringing her total to 3 within less than 10 years. In the media, Jill was portrayed as an ideal woman, intelligent, profound, independent, self-loving, and principled. She was frequently invited to speak about feminism, mental health, and the image of Black women in popular culture. Her answers were always calm and deliberate, never sensational, never attacking anyone. She became the big sister in the hearts of her audience, someone you trusted, listened to, and felt understood by. Alongside music, Jill expanded into acting. In 2004, she appeared in the series Girlfriends, one of the most popular TV shows about Black women at the time. Audiences were surprised to realize that Jill was not only a great singer, but also a very genuine actress. She did not act through technique, but through emotion. In 2007, her role as Sheila in Why Did I Get Married took Jill to a new level in cinema. The character, an overweight, insecure wife manipulated emotionally by her husband, touched millions of women. Sheila was not perfect. Sheila was weak. Sheila was wounded. And Jill poured all her inner depth into that role. Later, this very role would also become one of the most painful chapters of her life. After that, Jill joined the #1 Ladies Detective Agency, a series co-produced by BBC and HBO, filmed in Botswana and broadcast worldwide. The fact that a neo-soul singer from Philadelphia appeared in a high-quality international project demonstrated just how significant her status had become at that time. The wound no one could see. At the height of her career, with millions of albums sold, 3 Grammy Awards in hand, and her status as a neo-soul icon, many believed that Jill Scott had defeated the system. But behind that facade of success, she was entering a period in which everything gradually became heavier than ever. From very early on, her body became a topic of public discussion. Not her voice, not her lyrics, not her artistic vision, but her weight, her figure, the fact that she did not fit the image of a star. For more than 2 decades, Jill was constantly labeled the fat singer. The press mentioned her appearance almost as much as her music. On social media, people compared her to slimmer female artists. In interviews, questions about her weight appeared so frequently that they became almost routine. At one point, Jill lost more than 30 kilograms to improve her health, but as soon as she gained weight again, the comments returned as before. She was placed in a position where she had to prove that she deserved respect, regardless of her body. Jill never hid the fact that she struggled with her self-image. As a public figure, every paparazzi photo and every red carpet appearance became material for scrutiny. But instead of fighting back, she chose her familiar way: silence, a smile, and continued work. Because from childhood, Jill had been taught that the less noise you made, the safer you were. Alongside the pressure over her appearance, Jill also faced another battle, quieter, but no less fierce, a legal fight with the very record label that had accompanied her since the beginning of her career. In 2010, Hidden Beach Recordings filed a lawsuit against Jill Scott, accusing her of breaching her contract by leaving the label early. According to them, Jill had signed a 6-album deal but had released only 3 official albums, meaning she still owed 3 more projects. Hidden Beach argued that they had invested more than 10 years in Jill's career and that her departure caused serious financial losses. Jill's side countered by invoking California's 7-year rule in labor law, which allows artists to terminate contracts if they have been bound for longer than the legal limit. Jill had worked with Hidden Beach for over a decade, far beyond that threshold. Legally, she had the right to leave. Emotionally, however, it was a heavy blow. Being sued by the very place that had once supported her felt like betrayal. Jill once again fell into exhaustion, yet still chose to resolve it quietly without turning it into a scandal. While her music was filled with turbulence, Jill continued to immerse herself more deeply in acting. And it was here that one of the most painful experiences of her life occurred. Jill began collaborating with Tyler Perry from the stage play Neighbors from Hell, before joining the film series Why Did I Get Married? At first, this was considered a golden opportunity. At that time, Tyler Perry was a symbol of black success in Hollywood, a self-made mogul who built his own empire and opened doors for many artists. Jill trusted him. She respected him. She believed she was working in a safe environment. But then the fateful airplane scene in Why Did I Get Married shattered everything. In the film, Jill played Sheila, an overweight, insecure woman betrayed by her husband. To perform the role she had to wear a fat suit and heavy, bulky accessories. That alone was already a physical challenge. But what Jill was not told in advance was that in the airplane scene, Tyler Perry instructed the extras to verbally attack her. There was no prior script, no rehearsal, no warning. When the cameras rolled, strangers around Jill began mocking her weight. They laughed. They hurled insults. They discussed her right in front of her as if she did not exist. All eyes were on Jill. Not the gaze of an audience, but the gaze of judgment. She was verbally assaulted in an enclosed space with no escape in front of dozens of strangers. And Jill cried, not because of acting, not because of immersion in the role, but because of real humiliation. Later, Jill admitted that the tears on screen were real tears. They were the reaction of a woman publicly hurt, pushed into a situation where she had no right to refuse. In that moment, the boundary between the character and the real person completely disappeared. But as always, Jill did not make a scene. She did not accuse. She did not sue. She did not expose anything. She wiped away her tears, finished the scene, and continued her work. Because she was used to enduring in order to survive. Because she believed that speaking out could cost her everything. And because throughout her life, Jill Scott had been taught that sometimes silence was the price of a career. The confession that shook an entire empire of power. For nearly 20 years, the airplane scene in Why Did I Get Married was seen by audiences as nothing more than a touching moment on screen. People cried with Sheila praised Jill Scott for acting so truthfully, so deeply, so painfully. No one knew that behind the camera it was not acting. It was real pain deliberately orchestrated. And Jill carried that secret in silence for many years, until she finally decided to speak. In 2024, during her conversation with Angie Martinez on the In Real Life podcast, Jill told the full truth for the first time, without avoidance, without softening it, without polished words. She admitted frankly that she had been hurt, that she had truly cried, that the experience was horrible and should never happen to anyone. When Angie asked again, "Were those real tears?" Jill simply nodded. A simple answer, yet enough to shatter a wall of silence that had lasted nearly 2 decades. That moment was not just a personal confession. It became the spark that ignited much larger questions about the environment in which Jill had worked. She began describing Tyler Perry Studios as a closed world where power was concentrated entirely in one person. There was little room for dissent, no independent protection mechanisms, no clear boundary between creativity and manipulation. When you stepped onto that set, you were not just working on a project, you were entering the territory of a king, where his words became law. In that context, allowing extras to attack Jill verbally in the airplane scene was no longer a random artistic choice. It reflected a system in which people were turned into tools to generate emotion, regardless of the real harm behind it. Jill realized that she had not only been hurt by one scene, but by an entire power structure that made such harm possible. As Jill's story spread, many former crew members began speaking out. They described the working environment at Tyler Perry Studios as more like a harsh production line than a creative space. While Hollywood productions typically filmed about 3 to 7 script pages per day here, the number could reach 20 or even 25. A film like A Fall from Grace was completed in 5 days. Straw with Taraji P. Henson took only 4 days. To achieve that speed, Work shifts lasted 14 to 18 consecutive hours day after day. Exhaustion became a permanent condition. Rest was a luxury. Safety checks were shortened. Mistakes were overlooked. Not because of unprofessionalism, but because there was no time. Wages did not increase in proportion to workload. Staff were insufficient. Pressure was relentless. Perry often hired young newcomers full of hope and afraid of losing opportunities. They were grateful. They stayed silent. They accepted. A true modern sweatshop. Control extended into mental and emotional life. Many employees said they were restricted in communication, warned not to look Perry directly in the eye, and reminded to know their place. These rules were never written down, but everyone understood them. They reinforced one message: you are not here to question, you are here to serve. For those who hoped unions would be a shield, Perry's history quickly destroyed that belief. In 2008, 4 writers from the hit series House of Pain joined the Writers Guild of America to demand basic rights. Perry's response was not negotiation. He fired all 4. The official reason was professional inadequacy. But the real message to industry workers in Atlanta was clear: either you have a union or you have a job. You cannot have both. Then came Monique's story. After the success of Precious, she refused to promote the film for free because her contract did not require it. Soon after, she was labeled difficult, excluded from major projects, and her career was frozen for over a decade. When Monique released recordings in which Perry admitted to spreading rumors about her, the public began to understand that it was not a misunderstanding, but a form of punishment. Perry later offered to apologize, but with conditions. Monique had to apologize in return, could not bring her husband or manager, and had to meet him privately. An apology turned into humiliation. Monique refused, and the price was 10 years of her career. The story did not end there. In later years, more serious lawsuits emerged. Derek Dixon, an actor in The Oval, accused Perry of harassment and abuse of power. According to the lawsuit, Perry approached him with promises of roles and career opportunities, then gradually crossed boundaries. When Dixon refused, his character was written out. There was no independent HR department, no safe reporting channel, no protection. The only path was court. When these stories were placed alongside Jill Scott's confession, the full picture began to emerge. This was no longer an isolated incident. It was a pattern, a system where power was used to control, where silence was rewarded, and resistance was punished. Jill Scott was not the only one who had been hurt. She was simply the first who was brave enough to speak, after becoming strong enough to no longer fear losing everything. And when she spoke, the entire empire began to shake. Learning to love herself after old stories were told and wounds hidden for many years were exposed to the public. Jill Scott entered a completely different phase of her life. No longer the girl who tried to please everyone. No longer the woman who endured in order to hold on to opportunities. No longer the artist willing to stay silent just to survive in a powerful system. For the first time, Jill began to seriously ask herself why she had stayed silent for so long, why she had accepted things that hurt her, and why she always chose endurance instead of speaking up. The answer did not come immediately. It came from Jill returning to herself, to a childhood forged in strict discipline, to the deeply ingrained habits of being good, enduring, and keeping going. She realized that she had grown up in an environment that taught people how to endure better than how to protect themselves. That whenever she was hurt, her first instinct was not to resist, but to swallow it and move on. That had helped her survive in a harsh entertainment industry, but it had also cost her too much. Once she understood this, Jill began to change her pace of life. She no longer threw herself into work as before, no longer released albums constantly to maintain her name, no longer accepted roles out of fear of being forgotten. Instead, she became more selective, slower, and more cautious. Throughout the 2000s and 10s, the gaps between Jill's albums grew longer. From The Light of the Sun in 2011 to Woman in 2015, then Coming Home in 2020, each project was conceived over a longer time, more personal, and more clearly reflected her inner growth. Music was no longer a place to prove herself. It became a place to heal. Alongside adjusting her career, Jill also began to take her health seriously. For many years, she had been labeled for her appearance, scrutinized for her weight, and turned into a target of mockery on social media. But instead of losing weight to please others this time, Jill did it for a completely different reason: her son Jet. Motherhood made Jill see life through a new lens. She wanted to live longer, be healthier, be more present in her son's life. From 2017 to 2019, Jill lost about 63 pounds, nearly 29 kilograms through changes in diet and regular exercise. Not to become standard, but to become resilient. She once said plainly, "I didn't lose weight to be loved. I lost weight to stay alive." The most important change was not in her appearance, but in her emotional boundaries. Jill began learning to say no without feeling guilty. No to exhausting projects, no to toxic relationships, no to unreasonable demands, no to having to appear strong while being internally drained. In many recent interviews, Jill often mentions the word peace. For her, it is no longer a vague concept, but a life priority. She said, "I need peace. I need to know that the person in front of me is who they say they are, even when no one is watching." That sentence reflects a completely different Jill Scott. No longer a woman afraid of losing opportunities. No longer an artist afraid of being forgotten. No longer a girl who kept asking herself, "How much more do I have to endure?" Now Jill asks a different question. Is this worth my peace? If the answer is no, she is willing to walk away. From someone accustomed to enduring, Jill Scott has become someone who knows how to protect herself. From a silent artist, she has become someone who dares to set boundaries. From someone who lived to please the world, she learned how to live without losing herself. When trust becomes a bloodless wound. As Jill Scott began learning to love herself and protect her inner peace, she also entered another battle quieter, yet no less devastating: a crisis of trust and personal values. For many years, Jill had been seen as a moral voice within the Black artistic community, someone who spoke about healing, responsibility, and compassion. But precisely because of that, every time she stood by someone, her choice became not just personal, but a public declaration. And there were times when Jill placed her trust in the wrong place. One of her first major missteps came when she publicly supported Chris Brown after his domestic violence scandals. At a time when much of the entertainment world had turned its back on him, Jill spoke up to praise his talent, calling him a rare artist and suggesting that extraordinary people often carry deep, unhealed wounds. She did not deny Brown's wrongdoing, but believed he deserved a chance to change. Her statement immediately sparked fierce backlash. Social media erupted. Fans were disappointed. Many women who had experienced abuse felt betrayed. What shocked the public even more was that Jill did not retract her words. She did not apologize. She maintained her position that healing mattered more than punishment. In her mind, it was compassion. In the eyes of many, it was blindness. For the first time, the image of the thoughtful and empathetic Jill Scott began to show cracks that could not be hidden. Before that trust could be repaired, Jill faced an even greater shock: Bill Cosby. For many years, Jill was among the few artists who publicly defended Cosby when he was accused by dozens of women of sexual assault. She believed in the principle of presumption of innocence. She feared that another Black icon would be destroyed by the media. She had praised Cosby as a pioneer, someone who built a positive image for the community. For Jill, defending him was not just about protecting an individual, but about preserving a part of history. Until 2015, when old court records were released. In them, Cosby admitted to obtaining sedatives to use on women before having sex. Those cold statements struck Jill's trust like a direct blow. There was no room left for excuses, no room for hope, no way to deceive herself anymore. She was shocked. She was devastated. She felt betrayed. This time, Jill did not avoid it. She went on Twitter and admitted that she had been wrong. She wrote that she was disgusted by what she had read. She confessed that her heart broke when she realized that the man she had defended had caused so much harm to so many women. It was one of the rare moments when Jill publicly said, "I trusted the wrong person." A simple admission, yet as heavy as a confession of repentance. Alongside that awakening, Jill began to revisit an old experience that had once unsettled her, but that she had never properly named. It was an encounter with Harvey Weinstein when she was pregnant. In a professional context, instead of showing respect, Weinstein looked at her with irritation and coldly asked, "Who let you get pregnant?" That sentence left Jill frozen. She felt treated like a problem, an obstacle, a mistake in the powerful man's plans. At the time, she did not see it as abuse. She only felt uncomfortable and brushed it aside. But years later, when the hashtag #MeToo movement exposed Weinstein's true nature, Jill realized that she had stood very close to a dangerous boundary. If she had been more vulnerable, if she had needed the role more, if she had had less power, things might have been different. She almost became a name on the list of victims. All of these experiences forced Jill Scott to confront a painful truth. She had once believed that talent went hand in hand with morality, that success reflected character, that influential people carried responsibility. But the world did not operate by that logic. Some people were both talented and toxic. Some icons were both worshipped and harmful. Some wore the mask of virtue while harboring naked power inside. Jill realized that compassion without clarity becomes complicity. Trust without boundaries becomes a weapon turned against oneself. And silence when born of fear becomes an accomplice to wrongdoing. The return of Jill Scott. For nearly a decade, beginning in the mid-2000s, she almost disappeared from the music race. No more regular albums, no more packed tours, no more flashy promotional campaigns. For many people, that was a sign of decline. Some said Jill had passed her prime. Others believed she no longer had the strength to compete in an industry that was becoming increasingly youth-driven. But few understood that during that time, Jill had not disappeared. She had stepped back to save herself. In her late 40s and then entering her 50s, Jill allowed herself for the first time to slow down. She spent more time with her son, on her health, and on her inner life. She read, wrote, meditated, exercised, and reflected on everything she had been through. She learned not to let her self-worth depend on chart streams or awards. She understood that she no longer needed to chase the market to survive. What she needed now was truth in her music, in her emotions, and in herself. Therefore, when Jill Scott returned with new musical projects after nearly 10 years of interruption, audiences immediately recognized that this was no longer the Jill Scott of A Long Walk or Golden. Her voice was still warm, rich, and full of soul. But behind it stood a woman who had been broken, had lost faith, had doubted her own choices, and had learned to rise from the ruins. Her music became slower, deeper, and less showy. No attempt to manufacture hits, no chasing trends, no trap, no EDM, no viral formulas. Jill sang as if confiding in a close friend late at night. She spoke of loneliness, forgiveness, healing, and learning to love herself again after years of self-blame. This was not music meant to go viral on social media. It was music meant to be carried through the most fragile moments of life. At present, having lived through more than half a century, Jill Scott no longer lives in a cycle of chasing fame, romance, or public approval. The center of her world is no longer the stage, the studio, or the red carpet, but a boy born on April 20th, 2009 at 4:20 p.m., weighing 3.4 kilograms, Jet Hamilton Roberts. The Sun doctors once said she could never have. A child who arrived like a miracle at the most turbulent time of her life. And it is this very boy who brings her back to earth whenever she risks being lost in the invisible pressures of fame. Becoming a single mother was never something Jill Scott planned from the beginning, but her life had never followed a perfect script. After calling off her engagement to Lil Jon Roberts not long after Jet's birth, Jill accepted the role of being both mother and father and the sole emotional anchor for her child. She learned to arrange her performance schedule around her son's school calendar. She learned to refuse projects that would keep her away from him too long. She learned to place family above career, something she had not dared to do in her youth. After two failed marriages first, with DJ Lil Jon Roberts and later with Mike Dobson, Jill was no longer obsessed with having a proper family. She did not try to find a man to fill a void. She did not chase a model of happiness imposed by society. For Jill, marriage was no longer a measure of success or failure. She understood that she had loved wholeheartedly, tried her best, and that was enough. Jill Scott's journey is not the story of a star who never stumbled, but the story of a woman who dared to walk through pain in order to hold on to herself. From a well-behaved girl in North Philadelphia to a neo-soul icon, to a single mother living in peace. Jill learned not to remain silent in the face of injustice, not to bow to power, and not to trade her integrity for survival. When she finally admitted the truth, it was not a complaint, It was a declaration of freedom from a woman who chose to live honestly.
We encourage viewers to approach the content with an open mind, critical thinking, and to always cross-reference with multiple sources in order to form their own perspective. That's the reality of the game. Fame always comes with a price. If you vibe with the content and want the real uncut stories, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the Black Vault.